Lariat existed in her family, the way a broken chair exists in a grand hall, present, inconvenient, and only noticed when someone needed to dump their weight on it. While her brother was polished like a priceless heirloom, praised and protected at every turn, she was quietly appraised like livestock. When debts piled up and patience ran thin, the solution came easily. Sell her off to an old marquis whose interest began and ended with her youth. Then fate decided cruelty wasn't enough. She was told she had only 3 months to live. Strangely, that was the first time life felt honest. With nothing left to lose, she did the most reckless thing she had ever done. She made a bucket list. She confronted her family and was cast out without hesitation. The doors closed behind her, and freedom, something she had once imagined as salvation, felt cold and hollow in her hands. With nowhere else to go, she tried to survive on her own, and somewhere between borrowed courage and borrowed time, she crossed paths with the warlord of the empire, a man feared by all, devastatingly beautiful, and terrifyingly powerful. Dr. Zaxkoff informed Lariat with a heavy expression, offering an apology as he explained his diagnosis had been wrong. He clarified she was not terminally ill and would not die, and his words struck her with complete surprise. Lariat turned pale since she had lived under the belief she would die from an illness within 3 months. During that period, she had convinced herself she already did everything she ever wanted, acting as though her remaining time had been counted. Because of that belief, she even allowed the most powerful knight and warlord, Duke Candle, to swear he would find her no matter where she went. He had called her his dear and pleaded she never run away from him. Remembering this in the present moment sent chills through her body, especially since she now stood there knowing she was not terminally ill after all. Lariat clawed at her hair in frustration, her chest tightening as despair washed over her. She felt she would rather die at this point and even pleaded for such an end, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fate. Slowly, she explained everything had begun 3 months earlier. On one particular day, she felt slightly unwell and chose to visit a doctor in secret. She described her symptoms carefully, mentioning she could not sleep properly, felt bloated whenever she ate something spicy, and sensed her heart beating far too fast at times. The doctor had calmly asked her to remain composed while he explained his conclusion. He revealed she suffered from Rockadora disease, a congenital condition caused by an excessive amount of mana present from birth. He explained it was incurable and appeared only in a very small fraction of the population. The revelation shattered her completely, striking her like a thunderbolt. He continued by stating there was unfortunately a 98% chance she would die from the disease. With visible hesitation, he told her he feared she had only 3 months left to live. Lariat still struggled to comprehend those words, as she remembered the exact moment she learned she was supposedly terminally ill. The shock had been so severe she could not think clearly, and she barely remembered how she managed to return home that day. Yet she decided she could not simply die without leaving some trace behind. Because of that determination, she created a list of everything she wished to do before dying. She recalled shouting about her bucket list, declaring she would complete it no matter what. She called out to Anna and asked what she would do if she were about to die. Anna reacted dramatically, insisting she could not die and questioning who would take care of her if such a thing happened. Lariat felt deeply touched by those words and nearly cried on the spot. Seeing her reaction, Anna only giggled and teased that she could not even brush her own hair properly, which made Lariat sulk in response. Anna then stated she would want to buy every cake she could find and take a bite from each one. Lariat immediately stood up, arguing such an idea would waste far too many cakes, but Anna dismissed the remark as a joke and pushed her playfully, saying it was time to go eat. Lariat, however, refused, insisting she did not want to go. As she walked down the hall later, Lariat reflected on her strained relationship with her family. There was her father, who wanted to marry her off to an old but wealthy marquis, one of the Duke's former contributors to the nation, despite his business having already collapsed. There was also her mother, who shared the same opinion and wished to sell her off for benefit. Her mother had married her father purely for his status, and then there was herself, Lariat Blanche, who had blindly gone along with everything without resistance. Lastly, her thoughts reached her older brother, Ryan, the one the family adored. At that moment, a boy slammed the door open and entered the room, revealing Ryan himself. He was the heir, the one who received magic lessons, successor training, and every privilege imaginable. Everything had always been his alone. In contrast, Lariat had never received proper education or support. Because of this, the only skill she learned was handling paperwork so she could assist Ryan from the shadows. Ryan frowned deeply as he questioned what she was doing there. Lariat answered calmly, stating even if she was not welcome, she was still part of the family. She then questioned whether he had been paying attention during his successor lessons, remarking it seemed Sir Joel, the family wizard, and his teacher had been having a difficult time recently. Her words caused Ryan to flush with embarrassment. Lariat felt she could have done far better herself, believing she would outperform someone as untalented as him. Without warning, Ryan lashed out, pouring an entire glass of wine over Lariette. The liquid soaked her clothes and dripped down her body as he accused her of ruining his appetite. He declared he would not eat unless she left immediately. Their mother ordered Lariette to stop bothering her brother and provoking his anger. She coldly instructed her to return to her room and clean herself up, ending the matter without another glance. Lariette barely managed to steady herself as she forced her body to stand. She moved out of the room with looking back at first, then paused briefly and glanced over her shoulder. A bitter thought crossed her mind as she remembered she was supposed to die in 3 months, and she felt certain none of them would even care. She did not want to die while living such a hollow and miserable life. With quiet determination, she decided she would do everything she had ever wanted within the limited time she believed she had left. She questioned what there was to fear when death already awaited her, and that thought strangely strengthened her resolve. That night, she wrote carefully in her diary, recording the moment she had been told she only had 3 months to live. She listed the things she wished to accomplish before dying. The first was giving cake to Anna. The second was gaining independence, since she needed to save money and rely on herself. The third was breaking off her engagement with Marquis in a polite manner. The fourth was dating a handsome man, though only for 3 months. The final wish was traveling to the West, a place Ryan had bragged about endlessly. After writing everything down, Lariette felt she had no real regrets left in life. She realized everything she had done until now had only resulted in her being used by her family. Because of that, she wanted to try living for herself just once, and she felt she truly needed to do so. The next day, as she boarded the carriage, Lariette felt unexpectedly satisfied. She noticed Anna smiling brightly, clearly having eaten quite a lot of cake. Seeing that expression allowed Lariette to cross the first item off her list immediately, and the small success warmed her heart. Soon after, the carriage jolted violently, causing both of them to sway. The coachman quickly apologized, explaining he believed the wheel had gotten stuck in a hole and he would step down to fix it right away. Lariette pointed out another carriage approaching and suggested they hurry. The coachman denied the urgency and asked her to remain seated and wait calmly. As Lariette questioned his sudden panic, the coachman revealed the approaching carriage belonged to Duke Candle. Anna immediately affirmed they had to stay inside and maintain proper composure. Hearing the name sent chills through Lariette's body. She thought of him as someone from the strongest family in the Empire, often spoken of as a monster. Those thoughts alone made her tense. When she glanced sideways, she noticed a man whose face was covered in bandages. To her astonishment, he lifted their carriage with his bare hands and freed the wheel from the hole. Lariette felt genuine surprise at the sight, realizing he had moved the carriage with sheer strength alone. As he stepped away, she felt oddly delighted, thinking even a coachman from such a household must be extraordinary. Upon reaching the mansion, Lariette felt troubled rather than relieved. She had hoped to rest once she returned home, but her expectations shattered when Marquis Segreve greeted her by smooching her hand. She felt unprepared for his presence and realized she never imagined he would come to see her off personally. Marquis Segreve tightened his grip around her arm, questioning where she had been all day. He spoke crudely, saying once they were married he would never let her leave their bed. Lariette tried to push him away, her stomach twisting as she remembered the third item on her bucket list involved breaking off this engagement. She felt urgency rise within her, deciding she needed to deal with this matter today as well. Marquis Segreve leaned close and whispered how much he loved her pretty face. Adding her resistance only made him want her more. He smoked leisurely and remarked she was a good return on investment. His words made Lariette shiver as her body trembled with disgust. At that moment, she felt certain this would be the day she ended everything. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared above their heads. Lariette made a firm decision. Then, she resolved she would destroy this disgusting old man and crossed out the plan to break off the engagement politely. She decided the engagement would still end, but not in a decent or gentle way. The Blanche family had always been known for giving birth to talented witches, generation after generation. Among all the Blanches, however, the one regarded as the impact of the century was Lariette Blanche. She had been born with exceptional magical talent, far surpassing what most could achieve, yet she never received the education she truly needed. The reason for this neglect lay with her older brother Ryan, the designated heir, who harbored deep jealousy toward Lariette's natural abilities. Because of his resentment, her talent was deliberately suppressed and ignored. As a result, everything she learned came only from teaching herself, along with a few occasional lessons given by her teacher, who felt pity for her circumstances and quietly helped when he could. Standing firm, Lariette cast her spell, causing sharp earth spines to rise violently from the ground. The magic twisted and wrapped around the Marquis, forcing him to hang upside down in the air. She dared him to listen carefully, stating she would only say this once. She revealed she had no intention of marrying him and declared the engagement should be broken immediately. She patted him lightly, remarking she could not stand men like him who treated people as nothing more than money and investments. Suddenly, a sharp scream echoed from behind, calling out desperately for the Marquise. The Duke and Duchess rushed into the room in a panic. Without hesitation, Duke Blanche dispelled the earth vines, causing Marquis Segrave to fall heavily to the ground. Marquis Segrave trembled with rage and humiliation, vowing he would never forget what had been done to him. Duke Blanche quickly tended to the Marquise, apologizing repeatedly and asking for forgiveness, explaining she had meant no harm. Marquis Segrave, however, refused to accept any apology and rattled on furiously, insisting such disgrace would never be forgiven. Lariat felt a deep sense of exhaustion rise within her. The family who treated their own daughter like something to be sold, and Marquis Segrave who had been willing to buy her without shame, all filled her with disgust. She felt sick of every single one of them as they tried to approach her. The Duchess screamed at Lariat, accusing her of finally losing her mind. Lariat calmly affirmed she had indeed lost it, adding it had happened a bit too late in her opinion. She even expressed surprise she had not done something like this much earlier. Before she could finish her sentence, a sharp slap landed across her face. Duke Blanche shouted, questioning whether she understood what she had done, declaring they would go bankrupt because of her actions. Lariat's heart pounded as she questioned who had put the family in such a situation in the first place, and why she was the one forced to pay for his mistakes. She stated none of them loved her or cared for her. She reminded them she had sold herself to secure a wealthy life for the family, yet all she received in return was a slap across her face. The Duchess screamed again, stating the clothes Lariat wore, the food she ate, and the bed she slept in were all provided because she was their daughter, and there was a price to be paid for those things. Lariat argued calmly, affirming this was precisely why she had managed the family's financial books on behalf of her father and handled other household matters. She reminded them she had visited the manor in place of Ryan and had even agreed to marry to help pay off her father's debts. Duke Blanche shouted in fury, questioning why she would ruin everything now. He insisted she should have simply followed the plan and accused them of being too lenient with her, claiming she had forgotten her place. With a deep frown, he declared he would remove her from the family register and ordered her to leave at once. The Duchess immediately called out to her husband, saying such a decision went too far. Lariat whispered quietly. It was only a piece of paper that could be torn apart in an instant, questioning whether it truly mattered so much. She admitted her greatest fear had always been being removed from their hearts, but she realized she never truly had a place there to begin with. Lariat paused, thanking them for keeping her around for as long as they had. She deliberately addressed them as Duke and Duchess before turning and moving away. Duke Blanche shouted after her, warning her not to dare take anything from the mansion. Lariat laughed softly in response, finding the threat meaningless. Suddenly, Ryan called out her name. Lariat replied she had no desire for his farewell. Ryan questioned who said he was there to say goodbye at all. He accused her of destroying the peace of the family and humiliating him. He sneered, claiming she did not even know how to properly use elemental magic or earth magic and never should have provoked him. Enraged, he cast a lightning spell, sending a powerful attack toward her. Lariat did not even blink. She calmly cast a barrier, blocking the attack effortlessly. She remarked he remained a dimwit, causing Ryan to grit his teeth in rage. The ground suddenly crumbled beneath him, and he lost his balance. Lariat cast another spell, trapping him beneath the earth. She revealed calmly she was still stronger than him. Without looking back, Lariat walked away, leaving Ryan trapped and shouting after her. Afterward, once she moved out of the mansion, Lariat felt too exhausted to even process what had happened. As she stood outside, a heavy realization settled in, making her feel she truly had left her home behind. It had taken her a long time to convince Anna not to follow her, despite Anna's insistence on staying by her side. Lariat reminded herself she was going to die anyway, and dragging Anna along would only cause unnecessary pain. Within a single day, she had already taken care of the first, second, and third items on her list. That meant only the fourth and fifth remained. Since she believed she only had 3 months left to live, she reflected on what dating was supposed to be like, based on the stories she had read in books. She hoped she could casually date someone with plenty of experience, someone who would not become overly serious or attached. She wanted something light and uncomplicated, something that would not weigh her down. With that thought, she stepped forward toward a large hall, her mood lifting slightly. She felt excited knowing she had brought some cash with her, though she also understood it would not be enough if she truly intended to live a hedonistic life. To do that, she needed a proper job, something worthwhile. For that reason, she decided to rely on what she was best at. Gathering her resolve, she slammed the door open and boldly announced she was a purification witch offering her services. Purification magic was known as an unpopular form of magic. It required an excessive amount of mana and was far less efficient compared to healing magic. Both healing and purification magic shared many restrictions. Neither could be used on someone with an extremely high level of mana, nor could they be used on oneself. The same limitations applied to divine power as well. Lariat struggled slightly as she demonstrated her talent, but she felt those disadvantages did not matter much to her. After all she possessed in abundance was mana. However, the owner of the guild looked completely uninterested. With a firm and indifferent tone, he stated they did not need her services. His words struck Lariat hard, making her confidence crumble instantly. The owner added that mercenaries usually sought purification witches on their own, and there were countless healing witches already available everywhere. With no room for discussion, Lariat was thrown out of the guild. As she stumbled outside, she cried out in frustration, realizing how dire her situation truly was. She felt completely lost and thought she might have to try another mercenary recruitment office instead. Before she could calm herself, a group of thieves peeked at her from a distance. In the next moment, they rushed toward her and snatched her bag before she could react. They ran off quickly, laughing as they went. Lariat cried out desperately, shouting that the bag contained everything she had and pleading for them to stop. The thieves only laughed harder as they fled, feeling no fear towards someone they believed was merely a purification witch. Suddenly, before they could get far, massive fireballs flew toward them from behind. One of the thieves glanced back, startled by the unexpected attack. Lariat screamed, daring them to stop running. She huffed heavily, realizing she no longer had the strength to chase them. Her voice echoed as she screamed for help. At the same time, a young man also glanced back. Somewhere unseen, a god scratching his head felt a sense of satisfaction, thinking this one was a true genius and far too perfect to be given freely to the world, though it was already done. With careless amusement, the god scribbled an idea, as if presenting a piece of art to humanity. The young man, later known as Azrahan, possessed a strikingly beautiful face as he turned to look behind him, unaware his life was about to become entangled with Lariat's fate. The young lad slowly glanced back. The thieves came to a sudden halt when they sensed an overwhelming pressure behind them. A huge black aura surrounded the man standing there, wrapping around his body as he glared at them with cold, merciless eyes. A foul scent filled the air, resembling something decayed, like rotting flesh. The thieves hesitated, their instincts screaming danger. The pressure felt suffocating, far beyond anything they had ever experienced. Fear crept into their hearts as a horrifying thought crossed their minds. They wondered whether this terrifying presence could belong to Duke Candle, the monster spoken of in whispers. Duke Candle reached for his sword without hesitation. In a single fluid motion, he swung it through the air. The blade flashed briefly before slashing through the two thieves, cutting them down mercilessly. Their bodies fell apart before they could even scream. The Duke calmly stepped forward and retrieved the bag that had been stolen. By the time Lariat reached the spot, the scene had already ended. He handed the bag to Lariat, and in that moment, realization struck her. She finally understood he was not merely a coachman. He was Azrahan Kandil, the Duke of the highest status in the Harutian Empire. He was known as the Empire's sharpest blade. Not only was he a general who had returned victorious from a war everyone believed they were destined to lose, but he was also a ferocious warlord feared for his violence. On top of all that, he was undeniably handsome. The weight of his reputation settled heavily in her mind. Lariat felt a surge of embarrassment. She noticed the scent surrounding him felt intense, almost overwhelming, yet she reasoned it was tolerable because his face more than made up for it. She struggled to contain her joy, thinking someone with a face like his must have dated countless times before. She assumed he would not hesitate to let her go later, especially since he was widely known for being cold and detached. Duke Candle observed her quietly. He felt she appeared to be a noble, yet she traveled without any guards. To him, the encounter already felt like a waste of time. He had not found what he was searching for. He also noticed she seemed afraid, her body trembling slightly in front of him. He believed as long as his curse remained, fear would always linger in the hearts of others, even if he saved them. He questioned how long he would be forced to live like this. Suddenly, Lariat grabbed onto him without warning. The unexpected contact made him flinch as she beamed up at him with a bright smile. She casually asked whether he was seeing someone. She stated bluntly he was a good-looking man and suggested they date for 3 months. Her words created an awkward silence between them. She giggled lightly and said she should introduce herself first, stating her name was Lariat. She then asked for his name, even though she already knew it, believing courtesy required the question. She continued speaking rapidly, barely pausing for breath, while Duke Candle staggered slightly. He fumbled for words before finally introducing himself as Azrahan Kandil. Lariat blushed immediately, commenting his voice sounded lovely and saying she liked how low it was. Her reaction left him startled, and he questioned what was happening and whether she was mocking him. He thought it had been nearly 20 years since anyone had spoken his name so casually. Lariat suddenly called out to him again, repeating she wanted them to date, but only for 3 months. Duke Candle became flustered and pointed out she had clearly witnessed him slaughter those men while surrounded by a black aura. He questioned whether she truly was not afraid of him. He turned away, telling her to stop playing around as he stepped back and attempted to leave. When he glanced back, he saw her holding her face. He assumed, just as expected, it had all been a joke. In truth, Lariat was experiencing a nosebleed. She felt overwhelmed by how sexy and charismatic he was, thinking he seemed nearly perfect. In her mind, there was only one thing a man like him lacked, and that was her. She called out internally for him to wait, believing she would eventually ensure he could have everything. Later, while staying at an inn, Lariat held a mug of beer and wondered how she could possibly meet him again. As she sat there, she overheard people nearby discussing Duke Candle. The conversation made her join them. She quietly joined in as someone questioned whether Duke Candle was searching for a purification witch. Lariat leaned closer, asking them to explain. One man informed her the Duke was apparently cursed, and the curse caused him to smell like death itself, similar to rotting corpses. Lariat recalled the scent she had noticed earlier, and felt it had not been as terrible as described. The man continued, explaining Duke Candle had been hiring information guilds to search for a purification witch capable of lifting the curse. However, none were willing to take the case because the curse was considered too severe. Another person added that purification witches were already rare. It was further explained that purification magic required more mana than healing magic, but could be used to lift curses. Despite that, it remained unpopular since more people died from blade wounds than curses. This was why Duke Candle had failed to find a suitable purification witch. Lariat realized if she wanted to catch the tiger, she would have to enter the tiger's den. With firm resolve, she decided she would catch Azrahan no matter what. A week later, Lariat entered an information guild. She remarked calmly she had finally found him. Standing before Duke Candle and the guild leader, she reflected it must have been awkward for him when she abruptly asked him to date her without a proper introduction. She suggested they start over properly, this time as employer and employee, and asked to reintroduce herself. Duke Candle felt disbelief rise within him. He realized she was still standing there even after he had tried to scare her away. Lariat introduced herself politely, stating she was Lariat Blanche, the most skilled purification witch in the Empire. She declared she would purify his curse. In exchange, she requested food and lodging. She placed a contract in front of him and asked him to sign it. Lariat swallowed hard, feeling her throat tighten as she stood before him. She could sense it clearly now, the overpowering aura surrounding him, heavy enough to press against her chest. Azrahan regarded her with an intimidating presence and questioned whether she was truly certain she could keep her promise. He warned her coldly that if this was nothing more than a joke, she would not live to see another day. Lariat felt a flicker of unease, yet she reminded herself she had never truly learned how to use magic properly in the first place. Still, she believed it would be fine, since she knew how to use purification magic. More importantly, she questioned what there really was to fear. She was going to die anyway. With that thought steadying her resolve, she reached out and grabbed Azrahan's hand. The sudden contact jolted him. A yellow light enveloped them both, spreading outward in a glowing haze. The soothing energy surged into Azrahan's body, and Lariat forced herself to breathe steadily. She immediately felt how much mana the spell was consuming, far more than she had expected. The curse resisting her magic was overwhelmingly powerful. It became even more difficult when she realized her mana was not fully compatible with the nature of his curse. Despite that, she continued to pour everything she had into the spell. The light intensified, growing brighter and brighter, until Lariat finally released Azrahan's hand. The moment she did, all strength drained from her body. She felt completely emptied of mana, her legs trembling as exhaustion overtook her. Weakly, she asked him to check whether it had worked. Azrahan felt a familiar heaviness settle in his chest. He believed he should not get his hopes up since he already knew the outcome. He had endured this curse since childhood and understood it far too well. Memories surfaced of a blood-soaked, murderous voice echoing in his mind, declaring his skin would break apart and his body would fill the room with the stench of rotting flesh. That voice had haunted him for years. Because of that, he felt he could not allow himself to hope. Then something unexpected happened. He noticed his hand beginning to sparkle faintly. The skin brightened, regaining a healthy appearance. His heartbeat quickened as realization struck him. This was not an illusion, it was a miracle. He stared at his hand in disbelief, his breath catching as the truth settled in. Lariat let out a small giggle and casually asked whether he could sign the contract. Now, Azrahan clenched his fist tightly, overwhelmed by the sight before him. To him, the miracle shining on his hand was blindingly beautiful. More than that, he realized she herself was the only miracle capable of lifting his curse. He felt a powerful fear rise within him, the fear of losing her. Completely drained from the loss of mana, Lariat collapsed forward into his arms. Azrahan caught her instinctively, holding her close. In that moment, he realized he did not want to lose her, and more importantly, he could not afford to. He affirmed silently that until the curse was fully lifted, he would never let her go. Holding her securely, he signed the contract. The agreement stated Azrahan would provide Lariat with 3 months of lodging as payment for purifying the curse. Later, within the mansion, Lariat slowly opened her eyes. Disorientation washed over her as she questioned where she was. Azrahan replied calmly that she was finally awake. She then questioned him about their surroundings, and he explained she was in Candle Manor. He added he had brought her there according to the terms of their agreement, asking whether this arrangement was inadequate. He stated if it was, he could look for another solution. Lariat responded quickly, affirming everything was fine and adding she felt the place was wonderful. Azrahan handed her the agreement, explaining he would keep the other copy of the contract. The gesture delighted her, and her eyes lit up with excitement. She swung her arm toward him playfully and asked whether she had been asleep for long. Azrahan affirmed she had, adding she was the first person ever to successfully purify his curse. Lariat immediately grabbed his hand, feeling an overwhelming urge to hug him. Since she restrained herself, she decided holding hands would suffice. She shook his hand enthusiastically, thanking him and adding he should be good to her, as she promised she would keep her end of the deal. Azrahan felt troubled by her behavior and affirmed their relationship was strictly that of employer and employee. Inwardly, he questioned why she was not avoiding him and wondered what exactly was going on. Lariat called out to him again and asked him not to address her as Miss. She requested he call her by her name instead, and simply call her Ri. The request made Azrahan flinch slightly. He stood up and stated he had only come to check on her conditions and she had fainted. He added he had brought her some necessities, and seeing she appeared fine, he would leave now. Lariat frowned as she watched him. She thought he looked like the type with plenty of dating experience, yet he was acting strangely cold toward her. She wondered whether she simply was not his type. Soon after, she grinned, thinking she could always change that if necessary. The thought sent an inexplicable chill down Azrahan's spine. Azrahan cautioned her not to raise her hopes too high, since they could not yet be sure the curse was fully healed. Lariat smirked in response, feeling his concern sounded sweet. Seeing her bright expression, Azrahan unconsciously took a few steps back. He bid her to rest well, and stated they would meet again the following day before leaving the room. Left alone, Lariat bundled herself under the covers and hugged a pillow tightly. She let out a frustrated scream, complaining it was unfair to show her such a beautiful face the moment she woke up. She questioned why he had to be so handsome and even thought his face deserved to be passed down through generations. Outside the door, Azrahan heard every word. His ears burned as he blushed, muttering to himself there was definitely something wrong with her. The next morning, Azrahan calmly sipped his tea. He glanced toward Lariat and asked whether there was something she wanted to say. Lariat had been staring at him intently and affirmed she had been waiting for him to notice. She questioned why he was not eating with her, which made Azrahan flinch slightly. Lariat explained she had been waiting, thinking they would have breakfast together. Azrahan replied, she must have a strong stomach to want to eat with him. Lariat questioned what he meant and why that mattered. Azrahan then addressed her as mage and questioned how much she actually knew about his curse. Lariat attempted to dismiss it lightly, but then explained it was the curse of the dead. She stated the cursor had cast it just before dying, which was why the curse could not be lifted by killing them. That also explained why the curse was so powerful. Lariat questioned why he had been cursed in the first place. Azrahan explained it had happened when he was 7 years old. He added she might not notice it now because the bandages he wore were enhanced with magic to block the smell. Without them, the curse caused the skin on his body to break down and rot. He explained purification mages had managed to slow the process over the years, but none had ever succeeded in lifting the curse completely. The explanation saddened Lariat deeply. Azrahan thought it would be understandable if she found him disgusting and chose to run away. He believed he would chase her down if necessary and even lock her up if that was what it took. He was willing to do anything to lift the curse. However, to his surprise, Lariat reached out and grabbed his hand firmly. She promised she would definitely lift the curse for him. Her words caused Azrahan's heartbeat to quicken as hope surged within him once more. Azrahan found himself wondering why Lariat was not afraid of him when she should have been. By all logic, she should have recoiled in fear and disgust, just like everyone else. She should have gagged at the stench of death clinging to his rotting flesh and looked at him as something monstrous. Yet she did none of those things. Instead, she treated him like a person. More than that, she looked at him with warmth and sincerity. Her eyes filled with a kind of affection he had never received before. Because of her gaze, the guilt he carried for wanting to keep her around for selfish reasons slowly began to fade. As Lariat continued using her purification spell, her body trembled slightly. Sweat rolled down her face, and a single drop slipped past her temple. Seeing this, Azrahan reached out and grabbed her hand, telling her she needed to stop now. His grip tightened as he noticed how thin her wrist felt beneath his fingers. far more fragile than he had expected. He told her she did not need to push herself so hard. Lariat replied calmly that she had only checked because she did not have enough mana at the moment. She pointed out his left hand and said it already looked much better than before. She explained there was still purification magic lingering within it. According to her, the magic was continuing to purify his hand even as they spoke. From this, she had learned something important. There was a limit to how much purification magic his body could hold at one time. Because of that limitation, other parts of his body could not be purified until his left hand was completely cleansed. Azrahan listened carefully and realized purifying his body little by little would be enough for now. Hearing this, Lariat beamed brightly and told him not to worry. She assured him she would heal him completely before she died. Her words confused him immediately, and he questioned what she meant by that. Lariat quickly clarified, explaining in other words everything would be fine as soon as possible. She told him he should not worry and should simply trust her. Azrahan hesitated before asking whether she truly was not afraid of him. In his mind, he questioned whether he was not disgusting after all. Lariat chuckled softly and asked if there was any real reason for her to be afraid. She spoke about the rumors surrounding him, mentioning how people labeled him a warlord who brought victory to an impossible war. She pointed out how foolish it was they called him by such a nickname when they should have been praising him as a national hero. She reasoned the title must have been spread by the imperial family, who were likely afraid he would gain too much power. In her view, the title calling him the Empire's unstoppable blade was actually a compliment, proof of how incredible he was. She continued by saying people should not fear him at all. Instead, they should fear the one who cursed him. Being afraid of the person who suffered from the curse made no sense to her. Azrahan felt stunned as he listened, sensing something deep inside him slowly healing. Lariat added it was unreasonable to fear the victim. What truly mattered was holding the offender accountable and punishing the one responsible. As she spoke, she gently reached up and touched Azrahan's face. She affirmed she was not afraid of him at all, and the only thing she truly feared was him refusing to date her. Azrahan quickly turned his head away and asked her to let go. Lariat flinched and pulled her hand back at once. She felt embarrassed, thinking his cheeks had been surprisingly soft and the moment had been too much for her to handle. Azrahan stood up, his ears burning red despite his attempt to remain composed. He told her he would see her at dinner at 7 in the evening. Hearing this, Lariat's face lit up instantly. She affirmed eagerly, biting her lip in nervous anticipation at the thought of seeing him later that night. Azrahan wasted no time and quickly left the room. Afterward, as Lariat walked down the hallway, she found herself wondering whether Azrahan might be weak to physical intimacy. After all, she had only touched his cheeks briefly, yet he had agreed to have dinner with her. Suddenly, a voice called out to the lady from behind, causing her steps to slow as she turned around. She quickly recognized the person as Hallstein, the long-serving butler of Kandal's household. He approached her with his usual composed posture, his expression polite yet curious. Hallstein asked whether she had already met his grace, and Lariat calmly affirmed that she had managed to find him without getting lost, crediting Hallstein for his earlier guidance. She added that they had also been able to arrange dinner, which caused Hallstein to pause in visible surprise. Hallstein questioned whether she would be joining his grace for dinner that evening, to which Lariat nodded in confirmation. He reflected quietly on how long it had been since his grace had shared a meal with another person. In his thoughts, he realized that this would likely be the first time since the late Duchess had passed away. Because of this, he regarded Lariat as something of a blessing. A gentle smile appeared on his face as he told her that he hoped she would give his grace a pleasant time during dinner. Lariat let out a small chuckle and replied modestly that it was only a meal, but she would still try her best. With a playful grin, Hallstein affirmed her response before hurrying away. As he ran off, he tossed a thick book toward Azrahan with mischievous intent. The cover boldly declared it to be a guide to a perfect date. Azrahan instinctively reacted, staring at the book with disbelief. He reflected on how the last time he had learned about table manners was during his childhood, and worried that there might now be new rules he was unaware of. Still, he felt that this was excessive. The title alone unsettled him, especially since the word date clearly suggested something that had nothing to do with him. Azrahan also considered the discomfort of being judged by a mage several years younger than him, imagining her laughing at his lack of refinement. Hallstein attempted to force the book into Azrahan's hands, but Azrahan blocked the gesture and stated that such a recommendation was completely useless. Hallstein immediately argued back, insisting that the book was far from useless, and claiming that it was likely the most useful thing he had given him during the 27 years of service. Their brief struggle over the heavy book ended with both of them visibly worn out. Hallstein then began listing polite behaviors, explaining that it was customary to pull out a chair for a lady and to maintain gentle eye contact while dining. Azrahan stated that he could not hear any of it as he attempted to leave. Hallstein called after him, asking why he was putting on his coat when the dinner would take place inside. Azrahan tried to flee, thinking that he needed to conceal the stench caused by the curse, convinced that he would smell unpleasant. Later, as Azrahan entered the dining hall, Lariat greeted him warmly. He took a seat, wondering internally why she appeared so happy to see him when it was only a meal. Lariat carefully made her way to her chair and sat beside him. She then asked whether she could review the contract, mentioning that there were a few changes she wished to discuss, to which Azrahan agreed without objection. Lariat leaned slightly closer as she explained that she felt the payment for her purification services was too low. Azrahan reflected on how direct young people tended to be, and instinctively leaned back. He replied that if money was what she wanted, he could provide it. Lariat then clarified her proposed amendments. She stated that the employer must dine with the employee at least once each day, and must also agree to leave the mansion with the employee at least twice a week. She added that the employer would cover all related expenses, although the final spending limit would remain his decision. Azrahan hesitated before asking whether leaving the mansion implied dating. Lariat responded with a bright smile, confirming without hesitation that it did. Azrahan felt deeply troubled after hearing the remark about a date. He felt as though this was the only addition she truly cared about, yet a quiet concern lingered in his mind. If she later complained about the payment and chose to leave, it could easily turn into a serious problem. With such thoughts weighing on him, he carefully wrote an additional clause. It stated that if the employee chose to leave before the employer was fully purified, the employee would have to accept any form of treatment the employer decided to impose. After finishing it, he lifted the paper and handed it to her, calmly mentioning that he had added another term to the agreement. Lariat read through it and affirmed her understanding. In her thoughts, the terms looked rather frightening on paper, even though she had been fully planning to purify him completely from the beginning. She signed it without much hesitation, remarking that everything sounded fine and that the contract had now been finalized. Soon after, she casually asked whether he would like to go on a picnic the following day. She had noticed how large and beautiful the garden was and felt it would be a pleasant place to spend time. Azrahan replied that he would need to go to the palace the next day. Lariat then asked about the day after tomorrow. Azrahan questioned whether it truly needed to be done so urgently. Lariat affirmed that she was on a tight schedule. Her words left Azrahan feeling rather confused, as he could not fully grasp her sense of urgency. Lariat pressed the matter further, explaining that the time crunch was related to winning his affection, as Raffen chose to ignore her comment and instead suggested that they focus on eating. The conversation ended there without further discussion. A few days later, Lariat stood by the window, gazing at the beautiful scenery outside. As she looked around, she felt impressed by how pleasant the mansion was. She never imagined she would have the chance to stay in a place like this. Since her mana had already recovered, she felt it would be better to hurry and purify him before they eventually left. With that thought in mind, she moved toward Azrahan to begin the purification. When she entered the hall, Azrahan greeted her with his usual straight-faced remark, commenting on how early she was awake. Seeing his face shining so brightly, Lariat felt momentarily overwhelmed, almost to the point of losing her composure. She muttered under her breath that the sun named Azrahan never truly set, as his face seemed to glow endlessly. Azrahan questioned what she was talking about, clearly confused. She brushed it off, and he soon suggested that they go for the picnic later in the day, mentioning that it was still quite cold outside in the morning. He then asked her to leave him to his work, as he had many tasks to complete for the day. Lariat questioned whether he truly did not have time to be purified. Azrahan replied that she had already recovered her mana, implying that there was no immediate issue. Lariat responded that she planned to remove the bandage, believing the purification would work better if she touched his skin directly. Azrahan agreed to her suggestion without objection. As Lariat held his hand and activated her purification magic, a soft glow spread across his skin. While performing the spell, she sensed that the curse on his hand was not particularly strong, so a single attempt would be sufficient. Just like before, the magic would remain within his hand and gradually purify it completely over the next few days. Azrahan remarked how unbelievable the entire process felt to him. He found it hard to believe how effortlessly she managed it, especially since he had spent 10 years searching for a mage and had never witnessed anything like this. He then asked Lariat how she was feeling. She brushed it off, saying it was not too bad, as she had figured out a more efficient way to do it. She admitted that she had wasted too much mana during the previous attempt. Leaning slightly closer, she mentioned that since the purification was done for now, they should proceed with the picnic. As they stepped out into the garden, Lariat began shivering due to the cold wind. Azrahan reminded her that he had already warned her about how cold the mornings could be. In response, Lariat leaned closer to him, lightly clinging to his arm. She said that despite the cold, it was still worth it, as she was on a date with him. A chill ran through Azrahan when Lariat casually remarked that it would feel much warmer if someone were kind enough to lend her his jacket. Azrahan immediately denied her request, not because he was unwilling, but because he did not want her to sense the curse clinging to him. Lariat accepted his refusal without protest, remarking that it was fair enough, as she would hate to see him catch a cold. Her response took Azrahan by surprise, as he had not expected such concern from her. Lariat soon wandered ahead, walking slowly while lightly patting the tiled path beneath her feet. After a short distance, she smiled and called out to him, asking him to come over since the sunlight felt pleasant and warm there. When they finally sat down together, Azrahan commented in a quiet tone that someone's company seemed cheaper than expected. Lariat replied without hesitation that it was only the case when it involved him. She then asked him to move a little closer. Azrahan avoided her reaching hands and replied that he felt comfortable maintaining their current distance. Lariat frowned slightly, her thoughts drifting in a different direction. She wondered whether he had been heartbroken in a previous relationship or whether he simply did not like her. She reflected that she herself lacked much dating experience, yet she believed it remained important to express one's feelings honestly. She felt confident in her ability to do so, even as she continued staring at him with intent focus. Meanwhile, Azrahan found himself thinking that he had never imagined sitting in the middle of a flower garden like this. Everything about the moment felt unfamiliar, and he felt completely out of place. Lariat opened the picnic basket and expressed her surprise at the food inside, remarking on how delicious it all looked. Azrahan recalled Hallstein's earlier encouragement, remembering how he had wished him success and insisted that he could manage this situation. In contrast, Azrahan silently wished for Hallstein to stay far away from such moments. Lariat then asked Azrahan about his favorite food. He replied that he did not really have one, which visibly surprised her. She found it strange and wondered aloud where the enjoyment was in eating if one had no favorite dish. Lariat then shared her own preferences, explaining that she liked salmon and cucumbers together. She mentioned that while she could eat them, she would not actively seek them out due to her dislike of their smell. Azrahan remarked that he found the scent rather fresh. Lariat guessed that perhaps he did not like cucumbers either. Azrahan, however, began wondering whether she was unconsciously purifying the air around her due to her abilities as a purification mage. He sensed that even the faint presence of his curse seemed to be fading. He considered asking her whether she could smell the curse, yet hesitated, wondering if she might be pretending not to notice anything at all. Azrahan took a bite of his sandwich, while Lariat quietly reacted to the scene unfolding before her. She struggled to keep her composure, feeling overwhelmed by how beautiful he looked in that moment. She fidgeted slightly, trying to restrain herself, which made Azrahan question her behavior. When he asked what she was doing, Lariat simply told him to wait and see. As they sat beside each other, a gentle wind passed through the garden. The flowers around them shimmered softly, and a ring of blossoms unexpectedly fell onto Azrahan's head. Lariat was taken completely by surprise. Azrahan turned to her and questioned whether this was meant to be a joke. Lariat immediately stopped him, insisting that it was not, and asked him to give the flowers to her. Azrahan tossed them away without thinking, causing Lariat to scream in protest, telling him not to do it like that. She lunged toward the flowers while Azrahan shouted at her to be careful. In the confusion, they both lost their balance and fell into the fountain. Azrahan barely managed to shield Lariat as they landed. Once the chaos settled, he questioned the mage, remarking that it was about time she stopped causing such shocking situations. Sensing the sudden closeness between them, Lariat bit her lower lip as Azrahan gently tended to her hair. As his fingers brushed through the damp strands, Lariat assumed he was stroking it absent-mindedly. He reminded her to be careful, warning that she might catch a cold if she stayed like this. Lariat immediately denied the concern, confidently insisting that she was extremely healthy and rarely ever fell sick. Without any further warning, Azrahan suddenly lifted her up, stating that they should return inside. The action caught Lariat completely off guard. She struggled lightly against him, insisting that the date had been far too short, and arguing that it did not count if it ended this quickly. Azrahan ignored her protests and carried her back regardless. Later, as Lariat lay in bed, Hallstein checked her condition and stated that her temperature was at 101 degrees, confirming that she had developed a severe fever. Azrahan groaned in frustration upon hearing this, and turned a sharp gaze toward her. Lariat, despite her condition, attempted to lighten the mood by saying that he was witnessing her very first cold, and even congratulated him for it. Azrahan responded by glaring at her in silence, which made Lariat quickly apologize. Azrahan then informed her that he had already asked a priest to visit her, explaining that he needed to go to the palace that day and could not stay behind. Lariat affirmed his decision without complaint. Azrahan found himself slightly surprised, as he had expected her to give him a hard time or demand that he stay with her. Instead, she accepted it calmly, which made him think that she might be more mature than he had initially assumed. As he prepared to leave, Lariat continued staring at him quietly. In her thoughts, she considered how trivial a cold was, yet she felt deeply touched by how kindly he had taken care of her. As Rahan noticed that her reaction felt different from usual, which unsettled him slightly as he stepped away. He left the room and entered the carriage, his thoughts drifting elsewhere. While seated inside the carriage, Azrahan began wondering what Lariat might have told Duke Blanche before leaving her home. He doubted that the Duke would send his daughter away so willingly without reason. Duke Blanche's behavior seemed unusually permissive, yet Azrahan had not had the time to reflect on it properly due to Lariat's constant distractions. He resolved to look into the matter later. As the carriage moved forward, it passed by another white carriage. Azrahan briefly glanced out and noticed a figure with white hair passing behind it. He wondered whether the person might have been a female priest. A strange sense of relief settled in his chest as he thought that it was a girl. He quickly stopped himself, questioning why he had smiled at such a thought. The realization unsettled him as the carriage continued onward. Back at the mansion, Lariat felt her face heat up when she saw the person standing before her. The priest politely asked whether she was the patient, introducing himself as someone sent from the temple. He smiled gently as he explained his purpose. Lariat's heart raced as she observed his face, which she thought looked like a piece of art. The priest introduced himself as Doha, a servant of Altion, to which Lariat introduced herself in return. As Doha reached toward her face, asking her to allow him to heal her, Lariat's face turned red from embarrassment. As he cast his healing purification spell, Doha casually asked how she had ended up in a place like this. Lariat denied any negativity, stating that there was nothing wrong with the house. Realizing that his words might have sounded offensive, Doha quickly apologized, explaining that he had not meant any harm. He added that people at the temple often gave him a hard time due to his personality. He explained that the temple was a strictly hierarchical place, making it easy for a low-ranking priest like himself to be treated poorly. Lariat recalled hearing that low-ranking priestesses were often sent to remote healing assignments. She found herself wondering why his superiors had not healed the scar on his face, especially since she thought his appearance was already quite striking. Once Doha finished his treatment, Lariat remarked that she felt completely recovered. Although she knew his service had already been paid for, she felt it was still necessary to express her gratitude. She asked whether he would be visiting again. Doha leaned slightly closer and Lariat placed her hand against him, saying that she felt the need to thank him even if only for showing her his face. As she focused her mana, she decided to heal the scar on his face. She quickly realized that it required far more mana than she had expected. Despite the strain, she completed the healing and smiled, saying that it was done. Doha rubbed the back of his head in amazement, remarking on how incredible her abilities were. He asked whether she was a healer mage. Lariat affirmed modestly, saying that she supposed she was. Doha then asked whether she would be interested in working as his healer, offering generous compensation for her services. Lariat felt conflicted, as she believed low-ranking temples were meant to be pure places, and she also needed to focus on purifying Azrahan first. She apologized and explained that she was currently busy. Doha then suggested the possibility of the future, saying that any time she was free would work for him. Lariat affirmed that perhaps it could be considered later. Doha treated it as a promise and leaned in with a smile. As a sign of gratitude, he offered to continue healing her for free, adding that if she ever healed him again, he would ensure she was properly compensated. Lariat felt that the arrangement benefited her and agreed. Dofa then suggested that they consider themselves friends for now, expressing that he would like to get to know her better. Lariat felt an uncomfortable sensation she could not fully explain. She realized that she had never truly had friends before, and the thought of experiencing friendship, even briefly, felt meaningful. She affirmed the sentiment, saying it was nice to meet him. Dofa replied that the pleasure was his as well. As he returned to the Temple of Altion, the priests welcomed back Reverend Mikhail Dovrian, the high priest of the Temple of Altiao. Back at the temple, the priest Joshua tended to Mikhail with a serious expression. He advised him that it was not wise to leave the temple so frequently, especially for someone destined to become the pope. His tone carried concern rather than reprimand. However, his expression suddenly changed when his eyes landed on Mikhail's forehead. He jolted in surprise and questioned what had happened to the scar that had once been there so clearly. Mikhail replied calmly that a healer mage he had met earlier that day had healed it for him. Joshua was visibly shaken upon hearing this. He questioned whether a healer mage had truly done such a thing, his voice filled with disbelief. He cautioned that such a feat suggested a level of mana comparable to Mikhail's own, which made little sense to him. He questioned how such a thing could even be possible, as it went against everything he understood. Mikhail merely smirked in response, stating that it was something he intended to look into later, offering no further explanation. Meanwhile, Azrahan sat restlessly inside his carriage. His thoughts refused to settle as he questioned whether he should go back or not. He told himself that it was probably better if he did not. He affirmed internally that he had already decided against it. Yet, as he attempted to calm his mind, he found himself stepping out of the carriage without realizing it. The sudden movement made the coachman shiver, momentarily fearing that Azrahan was heading somewhere with violent intent. Azrahan paused, questioning himself once more. There was no real reason for him to go and see the mage, and yet he could not understand why the urge persisted. He wondered why he cared so much about her in the first place. That question lingered heavily in his thoughts as he approached the door. Just as he was about to open it, the door opened from the other side, and Lariat peeked out, warmly welcoming him. The sight made Azrahan realize that this might be the first time someone had ever greeted him at the door like this. Azrahan stepped inside and asked how her cold was. Lariat replied that she was feeling much better, explaining that the priest had been very skilled. Without warning, she suddenly grabbed onto him, which caught him completely off guard. She remarked that she would be fully healed once the priest treated her a couple more times. She then placed his hand on her head, asking him to feel for himself that she was doing better. Azrahan quickly withdrew his hand, thinking that her boldness was becoming increasingly difficult to handle. He stated that she did not need to greet him at the door like this, as it was not part of the contract. Lariat, however, followed him closely and said that she had missed him. She asked whether he had thought about her all day. Azrahan immediately denied it, claiming not at all. Lariat insisted that he was not acting like someone who had not thought about her, stating that he clearly had. Azrahan continued denying it while she followed after him, refusing to let the matter go. She then asked what he planned to do the following day. Azrahan replied that he intended to take care of some paperwork and asked whether she was ready to purify him again. Lariat denied it, suggesting that it could be done a few days later. She explained that before that they needed to go on another date. She pulled out a ticket and showed it to him. Azrahan glanced at it and questioned what that piece of scrap paper was supposed to be. His dismissive tone made Lariat fume and sulk. She questioned whether he had any idea how difficult it had been to obtain those tickets. Azrahan asked her what the tickets were for. Lariat replied that they were for a very famous show, explaining that she had managed to get premium box seats. She added that the following day was the last day the show would be running. Azrahan sternly denied her request, stating that he would not go. Lariat's eyes immediately welled up with tears, and she sniffled softly as she questioned why he refused. As she spoke, her tone shifted. Azrahan admitted that he could not expect to go to such places with his cursed body. He knew that the moment he arrived, people would avoid him and stare at him with disgust in their eyes. Azrahan realized then that she was taking his curse far too lightly. He decided that it was time to show her the reality of it, as pride alone was not a good enough reason to keep avoiding the truth. Azrahan questioned whether she was truly not afraid of him. He reminded her that he had been given the nickname of Warlord for a reason. He stated that hundreds of lives had been lost with a single swing of his sword. His words sent chills through Lariat's body, leaving her frozen in place. He added that it was inevitable for others to fear him, as he lived so close to death itself. Lariat swallowed nervously, acknowledging that it was frightening, yet not frightening enough to make her run away. Suddenly, Lariat swung her hand and slapped Azrahan. The action shocked him completely. He questioned what she thought she was doing. Lariat fumed as she replied that she had just attacked him and asked what he planned to do about it. She continued, pointing out that she had already touched his face, grabbed his hands whenever she pleased, and even called him by his first name. She questioned whether he planned to kill her now, and why he felt the need to hide himself from others. She asked whether he had truly done something wrong. She clarified that the answer she wanted was not a simple yes or no. What she truly wanted to know was whether he wanted to see the show or not. She assured him that he should not worry about what others might think, and instead focus on what he himself wanted. With that, she turned away and stated that she expected an answer by the next morning. She ran off, leaving Azrahan standing there in stunned silence. As she left, she added that she would go watch the show with another man if he did not want to go with her. Azrahan remained frozen, his ears turning red as heat rose to his face. He could not fully process what had just happened. The following day, Lariat was visibly delighted when Azrahan finally accepted her invitation. As he helped her out of the carriage, she deliberately stumbled, clearly pretending. Azrahan immediately reached out and caught her, which made Lariat feel deeply touched. Azrahan told her not to use such tactics as an excuse to hold his hand. Lariat replied that he should have simply gone along with it. Azrahan tried to explain that it was not what he had meant. As they moved forward, Azrahan felt petrified upon seeing the large number of people around them. Lariat noticed his anxiety and gently grabbed his hand, guiding him forward. She reassured him that they only needed to walk straight ahead and reminded him that their seats were private. She assured him once more not to worry as she led him onward. As they entered the venue and watched the show, the time passed more smoothly than they had expected. When it finally ended, Lariat appeared visibly delighted. She expressed how much fun she had. Her voice filled with genuine excitement. Azrahan admitted, though somewhat reluctantly, that it had not been as bad as he initially thought. Lariat then dazzled him with a compliment, remarking that the main character had been very handsome. Azrahan questioned whether she liked men who looked like princes. Lariat chuckled softly and denied it, explaining that she simply appreciated handsome people in general. Soon after, Lariat lightly patted Azrahan and said that she needed to use the ladies' room. She asked him to wait for her by the carriage, to which he agreed. As Lariat exited the washroom later, she noticed that most people had already left. She briefly considered suggesting that they grab a meal before returning. However, before she could act on the thought, a voice called out her name from behind. Lariat turned around and immediately recognized the man as a marquise. He stood close to a woman, his posture casual yet unsettling. Marquis Sigrev apologized, asking whether he had startled her, explaining that he was simply pleased to see her again. Lariat reacted without hesitation. She warned him by casting a subtle spell, stating that she distinctly remembered telling him that she never wanted to see him again. She added that she disliked repeating herself. In response, Marquis Sigrev snapped his fingers impatiently. He remarked that he was unsure whether she was confused or simply refusing to accept her current situation. He told her to know her place, emphasizing that she was no longer worth anything. Before Lariat could react further, figures emerged from behind and restrained her arms. Marquis Sigrev spoke again, stating that he had been waiting for this moment. He claimed that he had never gotten over what she had done to him in the past. He questioned what he should do now that she was nothing more than a commoner. He suggested that he might take her in as his mistress, adding that he was being lenient only because she had a pretty face. As he reached toward her, a sudden flash cut through the air. In the next instant, his hand was severed, causing him to scream in agony. The slash did not stop there. It extended further, swiftly taking the lives of those restraining Lariat. The hall was soon filled with cries of pain and terror. Azrahan appeared beside her, remarking calmly that she had taken too long to return, so he had come looking for her. He pulled Lariat close and asked whether she would be disappointed in him for getting rid of people who had forgotten their place. Lariat stared at him in shock. At that moment, Marquis Sigrev screamed at Azrahan, demanding to know how he dared to do such a thing, and questioning whether Azrahan knew who he was. Azrahan responded coldly, remarking on Marquis Sigrev's lack of manners, and questioning whether he was actually being addressed. The tone alone sent chills through Marquis Sigrev. Lariat tried to hold Azrahan back, pointing out that the man was a marquis, and warning that things could become complicated. Azrahan dismissed the concern, replying that he was the Duke Candle. Lariat insisted that even if he was powerful, it still mattered. Azrahan thought about whether she had forgotten that the Emperor had granted him the authority to execute any individual at his own discretion. Before the situation could escalate further, Lariat grabbed Azrahan's arm and began running, urging him to follow her. They quickly entered the carriage and fled the scene. Inside, Lariat struggled to catch her breath, her chest rising rapidly as she huffed. Azrahan sat quietly, sulking. He noted to himself that the man had been a marquis and decided internally that he would ensure the man survived in name only. He then turned to Lariat and asked whether she was all right. Lariat struggled to answer properly, stating that she was not sure. She admitted that she could not breathe properly at the moment. Azrahan turned his face away, thinking that she might suggest ending their arrangement, as she felt deeply shaken by his violence. However, he also realized that the contract bound her regardless. Before Azrahan could speak again, Lariat suddenly called out his name. She exclaimed that what he had done was amazing, and added that he had been far more impressive than the main character of the show. Her words left Azrahan completely dazed. Lariat giggled lightly and admitted that she was not particularly fond of violence. She suggested that it could be considered self-defense instead. Azrahan affirmed her explanation without argument. The next day, Mikhail visited to treat Lariat once again. As he worked, he questioned whether she had pushed herself too hard after the previous treatment. He pointed out that she should have been more careful, as her condition could have worsened since their last session. Lariat reflected silently, realizing that she had not expected her cold to return after everything that had happened the day before. She then called out to Mikhail and asked whether it was possible to heal a terminal illness using divine power. Mikhail replied calmly, explaining that a terminal illness, by definition, could not be healed by magic or divine power. He clarified that an illness with even a slight chance of recovery was instead referred to as an incurable disease. Lariat asked whether that meant there was truly no choice but to die. Mikhail smiled gently and suggested that someone with immense divine power, such as the Pope, might be capable of such a miracle. Lariat felt her emotions surge and asked how she could ever gain an audience with the Pope. As Mikhail observed her closely, he noticed that her mana flow was unstable. He explained that it was a rare condition caused by having an excessive amount of mana. If left untreated, it could lead to death. He clarified that it was not terminal in her case, but it could develop into a chronic illness. While it would not be easy to heal, it was also not something that would take an extremely long time. Mikhail suggested that it might be worthwhile to help her considering her skill as a mage. He asked whether she would allow him to attempt treating her condition, warning that it would require regular visits. Lariat felt a sense of relief and affirmed that she would appreciate his help. Mikhail asked her not to be startled by what he was about to do. Without further warning, he hugged her. The sudden closeness made Lariat blush deeply. Mikhail then pressed his forehead against hers, and a warm yellow light enveloped them both. After a brief pause, Mikhail stepped back and stated that it was enough for the day, though the process would need to be repeated several times. Lariat brushed it off lightly and thanked him sincerely. Mikhail replied that if she was truly grateful, he would need her help with something in return. As Lariat nodded in response to his words, Mikhail suddenly reached out and pulled up his sleeve. The movement startled her. Her eyes immediately caught sight of an injury on his arm, and her expression shifted to concern. Without thinking much, she quickly reached for him and attempted to heal the wound, questioning how he had managed to hurt himself like this. Mikhail only giggled lightly and replied that it had happened on its own. As the healing progressed, the scars faded far more easily than she expected. Watching the process closely, Mikhail smirked to himself, realizing that his earlier assumptions had been mistaken. Injuring himself on purpose had not been a wrong decision, as it allowed him to directly observe her healing process. Completely drained from the effort, Lariat lay back on the bed, breathing shallowly. She remarked that she did not understand why healing him consumed so much of her mana. Mikhail thanked her sincerely. To him, it was obvious why the cost was so high, as he was someone destined to become the Pope. He casually tossed a ruby toward her, stating that it was the payment for her service. The action shocked Lariat. She stared at the gem in disbelief and asked whether he had truly just given her something like that. Mikhail affirmed it casually, adding that his family had recently discovered a mine. The explanation only delighted Lariat further. She could hardly believe that she had received such a valuable gem just for healing him once. Mikhail observed her reaction with interest and questioned whether she always reacted like this when she was surprised. Lariat replied enthusiastically, stating that she would gladly serve him as her customer until death. She even asked him to promise that if he ever needed healing again, he would not seek anyone else. Mikhail chuckled at her words and affirmed the promise while thinking to himself that she was the one who must never be allowed to run away. The following day, Hallstein was walking down the hallway when he encountered Lariat. He greeted her politely and asked whether she was looking for his grace. Lariat questioned where Azrahan was instead. Hallstein replied that Azrahan was still sleeping, explaining that he had returned very late the previous night. Hearing this, Lariat sulked visibly. Hallstein then asked whether she would like to wake him up herself. Lariat hesitated and questioned whether she was even allowed to do that. With a bright smile, Hallstein affirmed it. In his own thoughts, he wished that Azrahan would simply fall for her and get married already. He then pointed her in the direction of Azrahan's room, and Lariat followed his guidance. As she walked, Lariat realized that she had never been inside Azrahan's room before. When she opened the door, she was shocked by how spacious and well-kept it was. She stepped inside quietly and approached the bed, where Azrahan was still lying down. When she greeted him, Azrahan immediately sprang up, startled. He questioned what she was doing there. At the same time, he caught a glimpse of Hallstein's lingering thoughts about marriage, which only added to his confusion. Lariat calmly sat down on the bed and stated that they should perform his purification there. She added that it was probably best to do it in his room anyway. Her words made Azrahan blush, and he questioned what she meant by that. Lariat explained that she planned to start working on his upper body that day, and that the process worked better if she touched his skin directly. She pointed out that he would need to remove his shirt if he wanted her help. Azrahan took a step back and denied that it wasn't necessary. Eventually, he slowly began unbuttoning his shirt, feeling deeply embarrassed. Lariat, on the other hand, felt quite satisfied, thinking that she was glad to be witnessing this moment. Azrahan called out to her, asking whether he needed to remove the bandages as well. Lariat replied that direct contact with his skin was required. The statement caused both of them to blush even more. Azrahan finally removed the bandages, revealing the condition of his body. Lariat was shocked to see the rotting flesh beneath. She had not expected the curse to be this severe. She remarked that it was worse than she had imagined, and prepared herself to examine it properly. As she placed her hand against his chest, a yellow light enveloped his body. Lariat stated that she did not think she could purify everything in a single attempt, as the curse was heavily concentrated in that area. She assured him that she would still do her best. She continued the process carefully. Azrahan felt extremely embarrassed due to how close she was, while Lariat grew increasingly tired, realizing that she was using far more mana than she had anticipated. Suddenly, Lariat collapsed forward, resting against his chest. She explained weakly that she did not have much mana left, as she had used most of it the previous day to heal the priest. She added casually that they had decided to become friends. She promised that it would not interfere with the purification sessions, and asked whether it was all right if she healed the priest occasionally. As Rafran questioned whether she behaved the same way in front of the priest, mid-thought, he reassured himself that the priest was a woman, which eased his concern. He told her to do as she wished. Without warning, Lariat asked Azrahan when he planned to take her out again. Azrahan paused, surprised by the sudden question. Before he could answer, he noticed Lariat losing consciousness. She slumped forward and collapsed onto his lap. Azrahan clenched his fist tightly, unsure of what to do. Sometime later, Lariat walked into Azrahan's study, calling out for him. She quickly realized that he was not there. She ran through the mansion, searching for him and questioning where he might have gone. Eventually, she sat down at the table, feeling discouraged. She began to think that he was avoiding her. The situation felt far more difficult than she had expected. She wondered whether she had been too aggressive. Reflecting on her actions, she realized that she had spent more time chatting about everything except the curse itself, and had grown close to Azrahan, who now seemed to be deliberately keeping his distance. Her gaze shifted to Mikhail, and she thought that he seemed surprisingly good at relationship counseling. She even assumed that he must have dated many women. Mikhail leaned closer and whispered that he did not understand what she was missing out on. He questioned why she did not try to make Azrahan jealous, gently stroking her hair as he spoke. He suggested that every man felt shaken when he saw a woman with another man. Lariat replied that she did not know any man she could use to make Azrahan jealous. She reflected that she had hardly had any boyfriends and had never really made male friends either, especially since she had been engaged. Mikhail replied that it was a pity. He pulled her slightly closer and remarked that it truly was unfortunate, adding that he himself was also a man. As the yellow flash enveloped her body, Lariat felt a sudden jolt of surprise. It crossed her mind that he should have said something before healing her, since the sensation had truly startled her. While recovering from the moment, her thoughts drifted toward the idea of making a remark meant to stir jealousy in Azrahan. The more she considered it, the more convincing the idea appeared. She imagined Azrahan warning her never to leave his side, his expression tense as though even he would not know what he might do in such a situation. The image made her sniff quietly, feeling convinced that it was in fact a clever plan. However, Lariat soon pointed out to Mikhail that she felt uneasy about doing something like that to Azrahan. She believed he would not be happy if he found out, and the thought weighed on her conscience. She explained that while she was thankful for Mikhail's suggestion, she preferred to try winning Azrahan over by herself. She expressed her appreciation for Mikhail's help, making it clear that she did not dismiss his concern. Even so, her resolve remained firm. She believed she could handle this on her own, silently thinking that Azrahan only needed to wait a little longer for her. Later that night, as Azrahan carefully made his way into the mansion, Lariat's voice suddenly broke the silence. She remarked that he was quite late, her figure already seated on the stairs, her presence stretching long shadows across the floor. The sight sent an unexpected chill through the Duke Blanche. He questioned why she had not gone to bed, clearly unsettled by her waiting there. Lariat groaned softly, explaining that she had stayed awake because he had been so difficult to reach. Rising from her seat, she declared that she needed to settle things that very day. She reminded him that the employer was supposed to agree to leave the mansion with the employee at least twice a week, asking whether he had forgotten the arrangement. As her words sank in, Azrahan felt an odd sensation stir inside him. He could not tell whether the discomfort came from his stomach or his heart, only that it felt strange. He realized that whenever he was around the mage, a wave of nausea seemed to follow. It was precisely this unsettling feeling that had made him avoid her. He did not want to experience it again. Trying to compromise, he questioned whether a walk in the garden the following day would be enough. His suggestion made Lariat feel as though she was the only one invested in making the relationship work. In her mind, it seemed as if all he truly wanted from her was purification. The realization left her feeling alone in her efforts. Still, with death looming close in her thoughts, she did not want to surrender so easily. She forced a smile and remarked that he must be extremely busy these days. As she reflected further, she suggested that there was likely no need for them to go on dates or share meals together anymore. She apologized, stating that she must have gotten in his way. Addressing him formally as Your Grace, she added that she had not realized how occupied he truly was. The title caught Azrahan off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless. Lariat continued, explaining that she would spend her time dining and spending time with her priest friend while he focused on his work. She assured him that she would not hold him responsible for breaching their contract, and encouraged him to prioritize his duties. Her hands clenched as she trembled. Azrahan staggered slightly at the sight, unprepared for her reaction. Without another word, Lariat turned and ran away, leaving behind a heavy silence. Azrahan stood there as his heart throbbed painfully, the weight of the moment settling deep within him. Later, lying in bed, Lariette opened her diary. She remembered how her father had given her that notebook, while he had gifted Ryan a sword adorned with gems. She recalled Ryan boasting about his travels to the west, describing his tanned skin and the clear water, fresh air, and kind people he had encountered. Listening to his stories back then, Lariette had agreed that it sounded enjoyable, all the while realizing she had never traveled anywhere herself. Now she wondered whether it was wrong to want to experience the things she had always dreamed of before her life ended. She reflected on the reason she had wanted to see someone in the first place. She had simply wished to create a few happy memories before dying, believing that such a desire was not unreasonable. Still, doubts crept in. She questioned whether she had been overwhelming Azrahan. In her memories, he had never appeared unhappy during the times they spent together. The way he had looked at her while they watched the play lingered in her thoughts, making her believe she should try just a little harder. She felt convinced that she needed to do something more. Yet as exhaustion took over, a quiet loneliness settled in her chest. The following day at the temple, Mikhail adjusted his robe as Joshua observed him closely. Joshua remarked that Mikhail had been requesting a deacon's uniform quite frequently lately. He admitted he did not understand the reason, especially since Mikhail had already risen through the ranks at an unusually fast pace due to his exceptional divine power. Mikhail replied calmly, stating that it was something they had all worn in the past. Joshua then questioned whether Mikhail planned to visit the healing mage again, to which Mikhail affirmed without hesitation. Joshua cried out in concern, reminding him that the mage lived at Duke Candle's mansion. He warned that it would be a significant embarrassment if others discovered Mikhail's true identity. In response, Mikhail chuckled lightly, stating that he would simply have to ensure he did not get caught. Joshua suggested that Mikhail could bring her to the Altion temple instead, believing she would accept the position if she were told she would be working for the future pope. Mikhail merely shrugged, remarking that she was not very typical. Joshua agreed, stating that it was fair enough. He added that she must be one of a kind if Mikhail found her interesting. As Mikhail departed, he reflected on the research he had conducted about Lariette. He knew she was the firstborn of the Blanche family and the fiancée of a marquis who had not been seen in public for some time. She possessed excellent healing abilities and an enormous amount of mana. Considering that she was staying at Duke Candle's mansion, a man known for his obsession with lifting his curse, it was clear she was a purification mage. Mikhail assumed the Duke must be spending vast sums of money on her services. He also sensed that Lariette had developed feelings for him. Seated in the carriage, Mikhail admitted to himself that making her his exclusive healing mage would not be easy. He believed he needed to seduce her before her feelings for the Duke grew too strong and make her his own. He acknowledged that she was definitely growing on him. As he pondered how to approach the situation, the carriage arrived at the mansion and the gates opened. Suddenly, Lariette burst inside, asking whether he was free that day. Startled, Mikhail affirmed that he was. Lariette immediately sat down in the carriage, suggesting that they should do something together. She proposed grabbing food and going shopping, her excitement evident as she thought about putting the jealousy plan into motion. After a brief pause, Mikhail grinned and agreed. He reasoned that it would serve as the perfect excuse to spend time with her, an attempt to win her over. Still, afterwards he found himself questioning why his priest's uniform had caught fire as they hurried away. He also wondered how he had ended up being dragged along by Lariette as they turned down the path. 10 minutes earlier, the moment rewound to when Mikhail and Lariette stepped out of the restaurant, both of them noticeably full after indulging in an excessive amount of dessert. Mikhail remarked that he still could not believe she had managed to eat all of that, finding it genuinely impressive. Lariette replied lightly, explaining that she had a separate stomach reserved entirely for desserts. She then added that she was equally impressed by how much Mikhail had eaten, to which he casually admitted that he had always loved sweet things. As they continued walking, Lariette asked, almost as an afterthought, why he bothered performing remote healings when he was already so wealthy. Mikhail explained that he normally avoided such tasks, but on this occasion he had been forced into it. He mentioned that priestesses of the highest rank often like to pressure deacons into performing remote healings, regardless of their wishes. Hearing this made Lariette feel sympathetic toward him. She tried to lift his spirits by assuring him that if something like that happened again, he should tell her. She added that she would make sure to deal with it herself. Mikhail found her reaction interesting. From his perspective, no one truly compared to his divine power. Yet Lariette possessed a mana capacity close to his own while remaining completely unaware of how extraordinary she actually was. He wondered how long his interest in her would last, though curiosity pushed him to ask what she meant by handling it herself. Lariette answered without hesitation, suggesting she could burn their clothes off in public or even hang them from a tree if necessary. She remarked that all she needed was a single word. Mikhail chuckled at her confidence and told her he appreciated the sentiment. He could tell she was capable of elemental magic as well. though he suspected most of her threats were merely words. In his mind, making an enemy of the temple rarely led to anything good. Just as he was about to say more, Lariat suddenly stopped walking, her gaze fixed on something ahead. She felt an immediate thought surface, imagining how perfect it would look on Azrahan. Mikhail noticed her sudden pause and asked what had caught her attention. Lariat snapped out of her thoughts and quickly replied that it was nothing important. She mentioned that she had been looking at a brooch and found one she thought would suit him well. Saying she wanted to check the price, she rushed toward the shop. Mikhail smiled faintly, thinking he did not need such things, but still agreed to wait outside while she went in. While standing there, a priest brushed past Mikhail without much care. Mikhail initially ignored it, but the priest stopped and glared at him, questioning his manners and calling him low rank. The priest demanded to know whether Mikhail understood who he was, boasting that he was one of the most talented priests, having been promoted within just 5 years. Mikhail calmly warned him to leave before doing something he would regret, a response that only irritated the priest further. The priest grabbed Mikhail by the collar, insisting that he needed to be taught a lesson, and repeating the insult. For a brief moment, Mikhail considered whether killing him outright would be easier. A high priest possessed enough divine power to burn a person alive if concentrated properly. However, the growing crowd surrounding them quickly made him reconsider. He did not want anyone discovering his true identity, especially with so many witnesses present. Deciding it was wiser to let it go for now, he reminded himself that there were countless other ways to deal with such a person later. Mikhail lowered his head and offered an apology. The priest smirked, satisfied, remarking that they were finally speaking properly. Without warning, flames erupted across the priest's uniform, spreading rapidly. The man screamed in panic as his clothes burned, while the surrounding crowd burst into laughter, pointing out his embarrassing undergarments. Mikhail stared in shock, not expecting such an outcome. At that moment, Lariat grabbed Mikhail's arm and urged him to leave. They ran off together, disappearing from the scene. Once they reached a safer distance, Mikhail asked why she had done something so reckless. Lariat smiled and reminded him that she had already told him she would not let anyone mess with him. She added that she would turn herself in if things became complicated, speaking as though it were a simple matter. Mikhail could not hold back his laughter. The situation struck him as absurdly amusing. Lariat commented that he sounded like a villain when he laughed like that, but he only laughed harder. Leaning against her shoulder, he wondered aloud what he was supposed to do with someone like her. She was far too entertaining, and for the first time he realized that his interest in her felt genuine. The scene shifted back to the mansion, where Azrahan stood seething with anger. He slammed his hand against the table, replaying Hallstein's report in his mind. Hallstein had informed him that Lariat had spent the entire day downtown with the priest. Worse still, the so-called priest friend was not a woman but a man. Hallstein had urged him to do something before things escalated further, suggesting that Azrahan put in more effort and at least start sharing meals with her. Hallstein warned that he never knew what her relationship with the priest might turn into if he remained passive. Azrahan let out a heavy sigh. He tried to convince himself that it was none of his concern whether she dated someone else. He reminded himself that she was only a mage brought in to purify his curse. Any talk about dates or spending time together would eventually fade. Even so, a familiar wave of nausea crept up inside him. He questioned why the thought of her with another man unsettled him so deeply. He told himself that she was only doing this out of pity. No one could truly love a monster like him. The witch's kindness, in his mind, stemmed solely from sympathy. He resolved not to let her actions affect him, repeating internally that she was there only to purify him and nothing more. The following day, as they sat at the table, Lariat asked why he had suddenly called for her. Azrahan replied that it had been a while since they last talked and thought it might be a good idea. Lariat agreed, assuming he had finally finished his work. She felt confident that her jealousy plan had worked, crediting Mikhail for being an unexpectedly good relationship counselor. As she looked at Azrahan, she thought he appeared particularly handsome that day. In her mind, he looked good enough to win over the entire Lariat then mentioned that Mikhail was excited to visit again that afternoon. She added quickly that he would not bother Azrahan, explaining that he planned to stay in her room. Azrahan replied that it would not bother him. After a brief pause, Lariat asked directly whether he felt jealous. At that moment, she leaned closer, and Azrahan became acutely aware of the distance between their faces shrinking. A sudden warmth spread across his cheeks, and before he could stop it, his face turned red, betraying emotions he was trying desperately to deny. Azrahan replied in a calm and distant manner, stating that he was not jealous and not bothered in the slightest. He explained that he did not care what she chose to do, as long as it did not interfere with their purification sessions. Despite his composed words, a strange tension lingered in the air between them. Lariat frowned slightly as she listened. She then affirmed his words in a quiet voice and slowly rose from her seat. She mentioned that she was not very hungry at the moment and said she would see him later during the purification session. With that, she left the hall without looking back. Once she reached the bedroom, Mikhail noticed her expression immediately. He questioned what had happened and why she suddenly looked so down. Lariat replied that things had not gone according to plan. Hearing this, Mikhail thought to himself that it was exactly as expected. In his mind, there was no way such a plan would ever work on Duke Candle. He seemed far too cold and detached to even understand jealousy. From Mikhail's perspective, all that remained was for him to say the right things and slowly make her his. He sat beside Lariat and gently tried to console her, telling her not to let it upset her too much. Lariat, however, felt a bit guilty. She thought about how he had come all this way just to see her, yet she kept burdening him with her own problems. Trying to shift the topic, she asked Mikhail about the glasses he was wearing. She commented that they made him look like a librarian and strangely suited him well. Mikhail replied casually that he had simply felt like wearing them. He added that when he had such instincts, they were usually correct. What Lariat did not know was that Mikhail had used his gift of prophecy. Only the most gifted followers of God possess such an ability, and it played a major role in selecting the next pope. Despite how extraordinary the skill was, Mikhail rarely used it for anything important, often limiting it to small things like daily horoscopes. Mikhail then asked what she truly thought and whether she liked the look. Lariat, momentarily distracted by his appearance, frowned slightly and admitted that everything suited him simply because he was too handsome. At that moment, Mikhail suddenly reached out and pulled her gently toward him, remarking that perhaps they should begin the healing session. Meanwhile, back in the chamber, Azrihan let out a frustrated sigh as he told Hallstein to mind his own business, glaring at him sharply. Hallstein groaned in response, stating that Lady Lariat had clearly been hurt by his words earlier. He added that Azrihan should not have invited her for breakfast if he intended to behave in such a cold manner. Hallstein could hardly believe that, for the first time in his life, Azrihan had given instructions regarding someone else's food, even going so far as to warn the cook not to add cucumber. To Hallstein, it was obvious that Azrihan had started to feel something for her. However, Hallstein also understood that it might be difficult for him to make sense of those emotions. Since the day the curse had taken hold, Azrihan had never allowed anyone to stay close to him. Hallstein sighed softly, expressing his wish for Azrihan to find happiness, even if it seemed distant. He then added that Azrihan needed to reflect seriously on what he was truly feeling. Azrihan questioned what Hallstein meant by that. Instead of answering directly, Hallstein moved toward the door and closed it, reminding him that the priest had already arrived and he should go and see her. He told Azrihan not to think about anything else for now, and said that what mattered most was how he genuinely felt. With those words, Hallstein left him alone. Azrihan stood there, lost in thought. He told himself that jealousy was something only people in love experienced, and love was not meant for him. He recalled the cruel words of the curse, echoing in his mind, describing how his skin would break and how the stench of rotting flesh would fill the room. He believed there was no way someone like him could ever love or be loved. Yet his feet moved on their own, as he walked toward Lariat's room. He realized that he had not truly cared for anyone since the day the curse had been cast upon him. As he approached the door, he heard laughter coming from inside. He hesitated for a moment before peeking in, only to see Lariat held within Mikhail's embrace. Something sharp twisted inside his chest. Acting on impulse, Azrihan slammed the door open and grabbed Mikhail, demanding that he stay away from her. Mikhail, remaining calm, responded politely, introducing himself as a servant of Altion at his service. Inside, Mikhail felt relieved that he had chosen to wear the glasses, knowing it would not benefit him if his true identity were exposed. Lariat was startled by the sudden confrontation. Mikhail quickly addressed the situation, assuring her that everything was fine and asking whether the interruption surprised her. Lariat tried to explain, saying that they had merely been helping each other with healing as friends. As she spoke, Mikhail squeezed her shoulder gently. Watching this, Azrihan felt his breath catch. He could not understand how such closeness could be described as just friendship. He ordered the deacon to leave, his voice tense. Mikhail affirmed the request and stepped out. Though his thoughts remained focused on the situation, he found it interesting that the Duke, who had appeared uninterested before, reacted so strongly now. Even so, Mikhail had no intention of giving up on Lariat. Once Mikhail left, Azrihan sat beside Lariat. She remarked quietly that she thought he had said he was not jealous. Hearing those words made Azrihan realize how emotionally he had reacted. He questioned whether he was truly jealous after all. The thought of her showing her gentle kindness to someone else made his heart burn painfully. He did not want her to hate him, nor did he wish to hurt her. More than anything, he wanted to be with her, even though he had tried repeatedly to deny those feelings. Lariat then asked what she should do next and whether she should go drinking with Mikhail. After a brief pause, Azrihan pleaded with her not to go.